Well, it's kind of funny because before moving to Asheville, North Carolina, I lived in Carrboro. I was a student at Chapel Hill, and I was in the Environmental Science and Engineering department there. So I'm very familiar with Carrboro, and so glad that these cool things are going on there. I'm going to take a little bit of a different slant on this. So how much pesticide are we using? Let's see what's here. We are using on the order of 500 million pounds per year in the United States. About half of that for domestic use, which is kind of shocking. In the 1990s, insecticides, so pesticides is this umbrella term, and it includes insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, herbicides, and so insecticides specifically decreased in the 1990s and stabilized in the first decade of this century. Herbicide use was pretty stable in the 90s and then increased significantly during the first decade of the century. USGS released a study last year that a lot of you may have seen. At the bottom of this it says, % of streams with one or more pesticide compounds exceeding a chronic aquatic life benchmark. In other words, bad for some stuff we care about. But aquatic life, of course, has different tolerances for things. You can see from 1992 to 2001, and then 2002 to 2011 are the time periods. And in the top yellow area, agriculturally, we see a little decrease in pesticide use. In the urban area, though, we see a significant increase in what we're finding in aquatic. So that's 90% of streams that were sampled have one or more pesticides over the benchmark. So this is troubling and environmentally a challenge we need to deal with, obviously. So what did they find? Just some things that you might be familiar with in terms of insecticides. The top 4 they found were diazinon, chlorpyrifos, carbaryl, malathion. Also some old banned pesticides that are very persistent, like DDT, dieldrin, and chlordane. Herbicides, they found atrazine, metachlor, and 2,4-D. Glyphosate was not measured in this study. And they said, basically, we have to make decisions about what to measure. It's very expensive to do these studies, to do the chemical analyses necessary to look for all of these pesticides and some of their metabolites. And it is perhaps interesting to think about who makes Roundup and what government agency senior staff include some folks from that very company. And if I were a member of an agency, I might not want to anger that particular company being concerned about my budget. But then again, okay. So some special mention here, by the way. Pyrethroids that's the name of the class of chemicals that you usually hear about commercially referred to as pyrethrins. So naturally occurring plant compounds. We made a synthetic version, maybe attach chlorine to it so it's more stable, more effective, but then also causes more environmental problems. There's a lot of pyrethrin used for ant control, and so often for ant control around buildings, they'll regularly spray a 10-foot wide swath around the base of a building. Fipronil and dichlorvos are broadly used for a lot of pet products like flea collars, fipronil or dichlorvos, the topical anti-flea stuff, etc. And we're seeing increases in both of these in municipal waters. They are broadly used for all kinds of other insects. Interestingly, the European Union thinks that fipronil is significantly implicated in colony collapse disorder. And the EU banned fipronil in 2013. That ban went into effect at the end of 2013. So we want to keep an eye on fipronil. Usually the European Union, because they use a precautionary principle, takes action before we do, but we don't usually find out that they're wrong. So associated problems, and I would think of this slide as being a slide of opportunities. This is a slide of opportunities for people who want to reduce municipal pesticide use. Because this tells you about things folks might be very concerned about who aren't particularly concerned about, for example, pollinators. People are concerned about human poisonings. People are very concerned about children being poisoned. So most of this is from home use because home users are, not educated in proper use of pesticides. Children account for the majority, or just over half, of poisonings. Children under 6 years of age. We're very concerned about that age group, obviously. Pets get poisoned. There's surface water contamination and groundwater contamination associated with the use of these chemicals. As well, we see urban terrestrial, meaning dry, not in the water, terrestrial and aquatic wildlife being poisoned, and of course pollinator poisonings. So this kind of tells me some groups that we might think about partnering with. One challenge is that depending on the state, many municipal governments don't actually have authority to regulate pesticide use. So they can educate folks, but they can't, the authority to ban it has to be delegated from the state. And unless you're in a state with a lot of delegated authority, and you're not, then that might not exist. I have not checked for North Carolina. So some groups really focus on the regulators. So they focus on, the state agriculture agency or whoever is the pesticide regulator. These processes take longer. They take a few years or many years. They're very high leverage because if the state agency can change regulations, that can be a real game changer. The state agency, though, very quickly can actually provide more information to users on safe uses without a regulatory change. And so that can be a good way to strategically think about this. With this whole talk, I thought, let's just look at the universe of A, what's happening, but also kind of how to think about it and how to strategically approach it. You bet. There are lots of municipal programs. Obviously, Carrboro in North Carolina. What I found was that there are lots of programs in California, as you would expect. Fresno, San Jose, Bay Area Stormwater Management Agencies. There are also programs on the East Coast and in the Midwest, but California seems to really be ahead of the game. So some solutions, which also tells us problems. This tells us the problems people are trying to solve with their use of these chemicals. Mosquito control. This is a problem people are trying to solve. I'm glad there's not malaria here. There used to be, right? Chemicals are why there isn't. The Xerces Society does have some good information on this. Some municipalities I found were using bat boxes, for example, for mosquito control. Of course, that's all about managing water, too. Rodent control programs. There are some places where they're trying to increase the number of owls in the municipal environment, so increasing predators. How many of you know that we have a rat problem in Asheville? Ooh. Yeah, we do. We have a Norway rat problem in Asheville, and in Montford, a fair bit. I mean, we don't see them. They're out at night, but they are disease vectors, and they can certainly cause problems with structures and things like that. There are weed prevention programs. They have some good information on San Jose's Guadalupe Park. So people are using these because they're trying to control weeds, right? Other options for weed control are, of course, to use fire, like in Carrboro, and water, like in Carrboro. Goats and sheep, think about it.
We tried those once.
Okay, that's a common story. So other places are using goats and sheep for a variety of plant control activities. There are even, now here, I'm not sure if they're in Asheville, but locally somewhere you can rent goats.
Harmony Greenway's got those.
Which Greenway?
Harmony.
Harmony Greenway. Ah, yeah. So, some interesting things. Another solution.
Poison ivy, right? Yes.
Your shoe. Other replacements or solutions I saw, were lawn replacement,
yes,
obviously, and transitioning to more organic landscapes or xeriscape landscapes as appropriate for the region. In areas where they have specific types of Lepidoptera, specific moths or whatever that are usually exotic invasives that are causing problems, sometimes instead of using chemicals, they were finding that if they found where those moths were, they could wash them off. Like sometimes they would be on the outside of a structure, and then they could just pressure wash the cocoons off and really get some population control happening that way. Using beneficial insects, obviously. I need to publish something on this, treating bees' nests with EM1. EM1 is effective microorganisms, and EM1 is a particular brand. These are beneficial soil microorganisms. So last summer, I treated 4 ground wasps' nests successfully with EM1. This involves going out, maybe during the day they need to be calm, but going out with a flag, to put a flag where the entrances are, because in the dark it's very hard to see the entrance to these nests. And you don't want to be wrong and hanging out, you know. Like, what are these? And then at midnight or so, going out with 2 gallons of EM1 diluted to about 50%, and a headlamp, you know, turned red. Not that I know if that matters, if it's red versus not red. But at midnight, you have to drink a couple beers before you do this. Go out, find the flags, and then you take their gallons of EM1 and just stick them upside down. Like if there are 2 openings, I'd have 2 gallons. Dump them upside down, and then kind of walk or trot away. You have to make sure that there's not a sentry at the opening, because there's always going to be sentries at the opening. But in the middle of the night, they aren't. They go to bed. So these microorganisms are microorganisms that are found in healthy soils. They're also found in a healthy gut microbiome, which means they're found in fecal material. And how many bees have you ever seen, bees, wasps, whatever, have you ever seen build nests with fecal material? 0. And I was thinking about this, I was like, oh, they like it really clean.
Yeah.
They're not going to like this microbiome. So what happens is they don't die, but they leave. So for about a week, you have a bunch of hornets that are very freaked out and looking for a new place to move. So they're in places they aren't, and they're looking at every crack and trying to figure something out. And a week later, 0. Absolutely nothing. And thus far this year, those nests haven't been recolonized. We also did this with a paper wasp nest. And this year, I thought, oh, duh. I love pollinators, but I don't want carpenter bees to eat my house. And I thought, let me see if I could just like spray a stream of this at where a carpenter bee is excavating a hole. And so anecdotally, what I have noticed is immediate abandonment. Immediate abandonment. So this is kind of a potential, I'd be happy to talk to you about it, and great way to deal with this kind of thing, because usually we do something like, you know, pour 7 in the hole, our gasoline, you know, that's not good.
You went back and forth between bees and hornets
Yeah,
and wasps.
that is right.
And so, you
Works on
know,
all of them.
because bees that nest in the ground are so beneficial, bees in general are so beneficial, why would you do that to a wonderful nest of bees rather than hornets or wasps?
Well, I am actually pretty much, my neighbors were getting stung when they were mowing their lawns, and they were going to get rid of these nests. So
Yeah.
that's why I did it. So I would only do it when it was like a health hazard, like on a playground. They, you know, something is going to be done.
Okay, gotcha.
But otherwise, I'm all about actually providing habitat and keeping those. And when I have at a picnic or something, and there are hornets coming onto the plate, I actually break up food and put it at the edge and like watch them, because they're fascinating, and I'd love to watch them like carry something heavy. Really slow, tell me a story, piece of hamburger. So you know, I love them, but sometimes they can't be where
Sometimes
they
they're in
are.
the wrong place.
Exactly. Sometimes they're in the wrong place. So yes, thank you for pointing that out.
So where do you get this EM1?
I order it, the only place to get it, because that's a brand name, is from Terraganics. I have no affiliation with them. They're in Texas. Oh, you can, what am I saying? You can buy it 5th Season now, too. Actually, 5th Season carries
Lotus.
agricultural.
And Lotus?
Where's Lotus? Sorry.
It's off of Louisiana.
Yeah.
Off West Asheville.
Lovely out there. Lotus?
Great.
Lotus.
Great. So I buy the agricultural, and I mix it with water and molasses and activate it, and do all kinds of stuff with it. Actually, I killed weed seed beds with it. Seed banks. Seed banks. Doing experiments with that, with EM1. Very exciting. So I'm doing a lot of research on that, which I need to
And I know
publish.
that you drink it too.
Oh, I drink it and I voice it off on other people who
But it's pretty
Should drink it.
expensive to use a gallon on one Yeah.
Well, so
it's-
one
it's
gallon,
$20 to $50 a gallon.
no, that's unactivated. So when you activate it, you mix it with like a 1 part molasses, 1 part EM, or a little bit less molasses, and 20 parts of water. So that
Okay.
1 gallon
Right.
makes 20 gallons. So the total cost for a gallon that you'd make is, maybe $4 when you factor in the molasses, maybe less than that. So $4 on a piece, that's not too bad. Yeah. Okay, obviously adopt different methods so you can reduce quantities of pesticide used. Year before last, I started teaching a class at the university called Exotic Invasive Plant Management, and it might be the first one of those in the UNC system. And so instead of spraying a swath of multiflora rose or privet, we'll cut and paint. So we'll cut it off and then just dab the little tiny end with herbicide instead of spraying a big swath of herbicide. So using bait instead of spraying for various types of insects, for example. So that's another, yes, it's still pesticide, but there is less of it being used. So different ways to do that. Another solution, obviously, IPM is a great idea. Some communities have found that they increase the rate at which various organizations adopt integrated pest management strategies if they offer awards, like annual awards for IPM users. Because some people really like awards. They're like, we're going to get this year, we're going to win, Or organic innovator, yes, here's your piece of paper, you're awesome. They're like, yes. But people respond to that. Educate people about use, proper use. Educate children. So there's a saying in China, if you want to plan for a year, plant rice. If you want to plan for 30 years, plant trees. And if you want to plan for 100 years, educate children. So education is one of the highest leverage things we can do, for sure. Partners. This suggests to me that there are some really powerful partners in this endeavor, all these problems and different kinds of solutions. Physicians for Social Responsibility, already involved. Physicians are in probably the most generally respected job that there is. Physicians have incredible credibility with community, etc. So if you can partner with PSR or something like that, great. There are also community-based health organizations like the Healthy Home Collaborative in Los Angeles County. They're involved in this, and this is largely because of the poisonings issue. But when you solve that, you're solving other stuff. Veterinarians, the Humane Society, locally, maybe Brother Wolf. Brother Wolf might say, we have more than enough to do, but Brother Wolf would probably also say, we know that people who use pesticides in their landscape, their dogs have higher rates of cancer. That's established. They're against that. Everybody's against that. So they might be willing to endorse a program, certainly, and say, Brother Wolf says this is a good program. That can be good to partner with some, popular local program. Low-income housing authorities are doing this because it saves money. So they have to treat for ants, they have to treat for cockroaches, and, probably try to keep broadleaf weeds out of the lawn. What a foolish endeavor. But they can it's like, yay, no dandelions and breast cancer. Not a good trade-off. Okay, but not necessarily. But there are some that will do that for you. Low-income housing authorities in different areas have really been brought on board because they can save so much money doing this. Schools, all levels. Prisons, last night I was like, prisons totally need pollinator gardens. The prisoners desperately need pollinator gardens. And I was getting a bunch of stuff ready to donate to the women's prison, and I was like, they need pollinator gardens. And that would be great. And they could also be trained. This is actually like exotic invasive management and low toxicity pest control is actually like, these are kind of great job training areas. Local governments need pollinator gardens too, but also obvious partners. There's an energy saving synergy, and it made me think of Asheville Green Opportunities. So many of the things that we might do to keep pests out of our house are also things we might do if we want to reduce the amount of energy we're using. So cutting vegetation away from your foundation, good idea, may not really affect energy use per se, but caulking, for example. And some caulks include pesticide, but it's probably better to have it there than be like spraying 10 feet around the house every month. But at the same time, then you have less air infiltration, you have better indoor air quality, fewer pests can get in, etc. So it would be kind of interesting with any of the folks who do energy efficiency retrofits and things like that, to also include some training on things to do that would as well reduce potential pest problems. Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Saving National Treasure. This is just an example of one of the programs that's involved in this, of course popular. Environmental advocacy groups, land use organizations, also partner. Land use organizations can often involve access to some deeper pockets. Just some of the folks involved with that tend to have deeper pockets because they do things that cost a lot more money, which can enable all kinds of other things to happen. Excuse me. Regulatory agencies and hunting and fishing interests. Environmentally, hunting and fishing interests have done more to protect environmental quality than all of the environmental advocacy groups. The hunting and fishing interests have done more to protect environmental quality than all of the environmental advocacy groups. So, because we have such a significant surface water problem here, we have a great opportunity with the major interests locally in fishing, for example. And there are a lot of folks who are interested in hunting. And because these disperse in the environment, people don't want to go get wild food and have it be contaminated. They also have credibility that people in environmental groups don't have, and credibility that doctors don't have. With groups of people that, doctors, that's kind of like some people would say, these are my people, and the doctors are kind of fancy people, or whatever. Takes a village.
That's right.
All right. We need to have good information.
Excellent grammar.
Great, yes.
I was like, oh, that's a drag. Aw.
So
She's my college advisor.
But we can also do a lot like with humor, like gentle humor, having people think about things differently.
Yeah.
Do you also eat with that mask on? That's a good question. A lot of people might not have thought about that. Right? Like, oh, wait a minute. Right. So I'm going to leave it right there and thank you, and do the panel answer questions.